Christmas is a great time of peace and of joy. I mean, now that you've got everything ready, the house is tidy and the yard's neat, now you can sit back and wait for the family to arrive for peace and joy. That is, if you've got the food organised and the ham is glazing and the turkey is roasting and the prawns are shelled and chilling. So now you can chill as well in peace and joy. As long as you got those presents right and you didn't get the blue one instead of the black one. Wait, hang on, didn't you get them a red one last year? No, peace and joy. Now that all that's done, the family can arrive and it will be peace and joy. As long as you don't forget to include, what's his face, the partner of the other one. And you mustn't let the new partner of that one get anywhere near the fruit punch, because that will go badly. But if we keep all of that happening and they don't come early and they don't stay too long, and then it'll just be peace and joy. Makes me reflect on that very first Christmas, all those years ago, Mary and Joseph and the birth of the Christ child. Peaceful, joyful. Because I'm sure the feed trough had been recently cleaned, if not by hand, probably by tongue. And I'm quite certain that the straw wouldn't have been the scratchy kind that we have nowadays. It would have been, clean and smooth and happy and not smelling as though animals have been sleeping in it and doing other things in it for the last few days. It would be just peace and joy, wouldn't it? Because I'm sure Mary loved the idea of travelling on Christmas Day, as we all do. What better than a road trip by sandals and donkey on dirt roads when you're pregnant? What better? For days, in fact, off to a strange city where the accommodation was literally impossible to find. I'm pretty sure it was all peace and joy on that first Christmas. To leave your family behind and stay with Joseph's in his hometown. All the in-laws that are so thrilled that Joseph's not actually married yet, or possibly even the real father. Perhaps this is the most famous of all blended families. When I think about that first Christmas, really, I'm not so confident that it was as perfect as we think ours needs to be. In fact, I'm not sure peace and joy come from making Christmas perfect at all. I don't think your Christmas has to be perfect for you to know peace and joy at this time. John's Gospel says, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." When John explains his version of the birth of Christ, his version of Christmas, he doesn't make it look perfect. He talks about light coming into the midst of darkness. There is darkness in his idea of Christmas, but that the light shines and it cannot be overcome by all of those other things that might be going wrong. The light cannot be overcome by that. So do things go wrong in God's world at Christmas time? They sure do. And we've seen plenty of them in recent months, but also just in recent days. And you might be asking, well, where is God when disaster strikes? And I guess in simple form, my answer would be, he's right there. He's right there in the very midst of disaster and when things are going wrong. He is light into a dark room, right there in the middle, in the midst of darkness, dispelling darkness as much as possible, wherever possible, and wherever people would receive his light. You know, I see images on our news of a whole village, being washed away, yet there are people who don't know one another, who realise and live out a belief that every person deserves to be saved, whether an elderly person or a child, and they would risk their lives to go and save that one that's being washed away or that one that's in danger. When I see that, I know that is God's light at work in them. They are living out something very much at the centre of God's being. That every person deserves to be saved. He came to his own, and his own people didn't recognise him. But to all who received him, all who believed on his name, he gave power to become the children of God. You are the children of God. And when you enact God's love, when you enact God's acceptance and his belief that all people are valued, all people are valuable, then you are taking Christ's light, and then you're being light yourself alongside, dispelling more of that darkness that is in our world. And the darkness cannot overcome it. And the Word became flesh. That Word that brought everything in creation into being. That Word that brought the light and the life to everything. That Word became flesh and lived among us. Not distant, not miles away, not sitting back, not caring about the stuff that goes on in our world. Not caring about when disaster strikes, but rather that Word became flesh and lived right in our midst because he cares. And we have seen his glory. So when things aren't perfect, when things are falling off the wagon, so to speak, or when Uncle Bob has got into the punch bowl and things are getting a bit pear-shaped, remember that God is there. For he came as light into the darkness. He took on flesh and lived right in our midst, in the messiness of our Christmases and our families and our communities. He lives with us and we are his. When we know that we are God's children and that God is always with us, that's where our peace and our joy come from. That's the source of peace and joy, not making things perfect, but knowing that God is with us and for us always. So I guess I really want to wish you a really ordinary Christmas.